Hello, this is a video which is walking through the second AAT sample assessment for Principles of Bookkeeping Controls. Okay, so hour and a half, 8 tasks, only 80 marks. So when you do finish this one, make sure that you divide your score by 80 and multiply by 100 to work out what percentage you get. And somewhat annoyingly, the system doesn't tell us that. Right, so task 1 about control accounts. Identify whether the following statements are true or false. A debit balance on the VAT control account means that an error has been made. No, can have a debit balance. A receivables ledger control account allows a business to identify the total amount owed from customers at a point in time. Yes, the total amount is in the control account, so yes, that will be true. You have printed a report which shows the total amount owed to suppliers is 18,504 at the end of March. Your manager is surprised that so much is owed, as only 2,800 was owed at the end of February. He's asked you to prepare a payables ledger control account, and we have this information. Right, so we are doing a PLCA. So our opening balance, so we're doing it for March. So our opening balance will be what was owed at the end of February. So it's a PLCA. So this is how much we owe to our suppliers, which is a liability. And therefore that 2,800 must be a credit. When we buy more, it increases the liability. And it's the total amount that we need that's owed to the supplier. So that's 19,200, increasing the liability. Purchase returns daybook. So that will reduce the liability because we've returned stuff, so therefore we don't owe as much. So 1440. And then we have discounts received, so that will be treated exactly the same as purchase returns because they both arise through credit notes, so they're treated the same. And then the cash book payments, so if we've paid our supplier, we owe them less, so it's reducing the liability, so it's on the debit side. You might prefer to think of it as well, the double entry for a payment would be debit the PLCA and of course credit the cash book. We know that a payment out is a credit in the cash book, so the other side must be here. Some of you will just memorize what goes into the PLCA, and I would always sort of suggest as soon as you get into this exam on your scrap piece of paper, just write down your RLCA, your PLCA and your VAT control account so you've got that information to hand. Right, and then finally we need to balance it off. So there's no space to write the total, so we just add up the total credits, subtract the total debits, which should give you a figure of 18504. Okay, this one is quite tricky. We have to watch the dates. So it says you have printed a report which shows the balance brought down on the VAT control account on the 1st of May is a credit balance. Then we've got all this information for April. And then we have been asked to calculate the balance on the 1st of April. So this is tricky because the balance on the 1st of April is our opening balance, our balance brought down. And the figure that they've told us on the 1st of May, that would be at the end of April. So at the end of April, we would have a balance carried down on the debit side of 9856. So I can't draw on here very easily. So, you know, if you draw yourself a T account for VAT, put on the credit side balance brought down and a question mark. That's the number we don't know. And then you're going to put VAT on sales on the credit side, VAT on purchases on the debit side, discounts received on the credit side, and then the bank payment on the debit side. And then, of course, we've got this closing balance. So we know if it's a brought down credit, it's a carried down on the debit side. So we're going to put this 9856 also on the debit side of our account. So I know you're kind of having to imagine this, but if you then balance off, you will find the missing number, which represents the opening balance on the 1st of April, which will be a credit of 1666. Okay. Task 2, reconciling control accounts. Complete the following statements. Reconciling the receivables ledger control account to the receivables ledger. We could identify errors in both. It could be something wrong in one or the other, or both. An error in the receivables ledger will not affect the trial balance. So the reason for that is the receivables ledger is not part of the double entry. The receivables ledger is what we call a subsidiary ledger that contains memorandum accounts, which means basically that it's extra information to tell us how much each individual customer owes. Not part of the double entry, and therefore will not affect the trial balance, because the trial balance is extracted from all our ledger accounts in the general ledger, which do form part of the double entry. You work in the accounts department of a furniture manufacturer. The following customer accounts make up the receivables ledger at the 1st of April. So as expected, most of them owe us money, and therefore they are on the debit side, their balances, with the exception of my show home, which has a credit balance of 280, which means we actually owe them money. So maybe they overpaid or something. So we've been asked what is the balance on the receivables ledger. So we simply add up all the debit balances and subtract the credit balance. So that gives us 105,470. The balance on the receivables ledger control account is 108,200. What's the difference? Nice and easy. 2,730. Right, then we come on to what I think is one of the more difficult tasks, which is to identify whether these statements are true or false. Right, the way I approach these, and again, you're going to have to sort of imagine the imaginary D accounts. So I sort of draw myself, in this case, an individual customer's account, and then next to it, an RLCA account, because I'm always going to be comparing one with the other in these questions, it seems like, or most of the time at least. So a sale of 250 was posted to the wrong side of the individual customer's account, right? So thinking about the individual customer, if we make a sale, that's normally on the debit side because it increases the amount of the asset. The customer owes us more money. However, this one's on the wrong side. So this 250 must be on the credit side of an individual customer's account. So what would have happened in the control account is it would have been done correctly. It would have gone on the debit side. So the trick is here, when something is on the wrong side, to fix it, you have to double it. So therefore, it won't just give us a difference of 250. It actually give us a difference of 500. So false. A cash payment to a credit supplier of 400 was recorded in the PLCA. So again, I'm thinking, right, in the PLCA, the cash payment would be put in as a debit. but it's missed from the individual person's account. The payables ledger control account will show a balance of 400 less. Yeah, it will, because we've got this cash payment which will have reduced the balance in the PLCA, but it wasn't in the individual supplier's account, so therefore the PLCA figure will be smaller by the £400. So true for that one. The discount allowed of £50 was recorded as a sales return. So I'm thinking, well, a discount allowed and a sales return, they're kind of the same thing, because when you have a credit note, it might be because stuff's been returned, or it might be because you've allowed a discount. So they're basically the same thing. So it's not going to result in any difference, because you just kind of, it's like an error of commission in effect. So false. A purchase return of £80 has been recorded twice in the individual supplier account. So a purchase return will reduce the amount that we owe in the supplier's account. So we've reduced it by too much, basically. The balance of the PLCA account will be £80 higher. Yes, it will, because we've reduced by £80 too much in the individual supplier's account, so that one will be lower, the PLCA will be higher, so true for that one. HMRC is included as a supplier when preparing the PLCA. No. A discount allowed of 175 was posted twice to the individual customer's account, so that will have reduced the amount that the customer owes by too much, but only recorded once in the RLCA. So that means the balance in the customer's account will be lower. So not the balance in the RLCA. This statement's round the wrong way, so that will be false. So perhaps a better way of thinking about these is just to kind of talk through, you know, whether they owe less or more, like I've been trying to do there. Right, task 3. Payment methods, reconciling the cash book to the bank statement. So CHAPS we know is immediate because it is for high value amounts that need to go immediately. There's a fee charge for that, often used with property purchase. And a debit card will also come out straight away. Right, differences. So we need to drag and drop these statements. So the account clerk realised that a large amount of money from cash sales had accumulated, just means it's built up, we've got a lot of money hanging around, and decided to take this to the bank. So they're paying it in at the bank, so that will be a counter credit. The gas and electric bill for the month was automatically paid out of the bank account. Automatic, so that's going to be a direct debit. Direct debit can be a fixed or variable amount that you have given the authority for the recipient to take from your account. Cheques received from customers were paid into the bank just before the month end, but do not yet appear on the bank statement. So that's a timing difference. Don't be fooled when you see cheques and think, oh, it must be unpresented cheques. It's money. It's money going in, so it'd be outstanding lodgements. And then the business has paid suppliers by cheque. These do not yet appear on the bank statement, so that one will be unpresented cheques. Identify the following adjustments. Identify if the following adjustments will need to be made in the cash book, the bank rec, both, or neither. A credit sale was recorded as a cash sale. Right, so a credit sale is one where I would send an invoice and it wouldn't affect the bank at all. We're being told it's been recorded as a cash sale. So that means instead of going debit RLCA, we've gone debit the bank, we've recognised the money, but the customer hasn't given us any money, so the cash book is wrong. So the cash book would therefore need to be adjusted. A customer who owed £800 only paid £720 because they took advantage of a prompt payment discount. Well, that's correct. They should perhaps only have paid £720. And as long as that's been correctly recorded in the cash book, it won't be a timing difference. It won't have to be adjusted anywhere. Okay, task 4. This is the bank rec question, so I shall attempt to use the highlighter. It's not the easiest, but we'll see how we do. Right, so first things first with a bank rec question, check your opening balance. Right, so I can see here 5489, that's a liability in my cash books. That means I'm overdrawn. They've put a D next to this opening balance, so that also means overdrawn. So I can take one number away from the other, which gives me 2051. So I'm looking for that 2051. There it is. So that must have cleared. So if you think about it, 3438 and the bank statement minus another 2051 gives us this balance that we have in our cash book. So I can highlight all 3 of those because they're now reconciled. We then check line by line for the others. So 1899 is there. $1799 I saw, so that is in both. $2299. $500 isn't there. 1399 is. We're just highlighting like this. Right, so that's that side done. So we've got one thing unticked in the cash book and one payment in unticked on the bank statement. Right, so what about going out? All metals 600 isn't there. 1230 is there. $786 is there. And that's it. So I've got one item unticked here in the cash book. And I've got one item unticked here. So I'm kind of thinking that looks about right for these questions. Although don't take anything for granted. So to update the cash book and prepare the bank reconciliation. So my cash book here ends with 190 on the credit side. So I'm bringing that down as 190 on the debit side. Now, it seems to keep highlighting, but it doesn't matter. Right, then my adjustments in the cash book are going to be items that are in my bank statement that haven't yet hit, haven't been written into the cash book. So I've got a counter credit here of £500. That was money coming in. So that's a debit. And the drop down gives me counter credit, hopefully, as an option, which I can't see. Oh, there it is, counter credit. And then the payment out. So again, looking in the bank statement for items that are not in the cash book. So I've got 112 there. And that relates to a direct debit for the phone company. So I can now do my calculation. So 190 plus 500 subtract 112 gives me 578, and it's got to be written on that side because it's got to balance. So both sides add up to 690. Right, then on to the bank reconciliation. So the closing balance per the bank statement. So here's the bank statement. The end balance is 279 credit. So that means I've got money in the bank. I'm then going to add the unticked items from my cash book because they haven't yet cleared the bank. So I've got 899 is going to come and be added shortly. That related to Finley Green. And then looking back up here, I've got 600 that I know is going to come out shortly as well. So minus 600 doesn't ask me to write pluses and minuses, I don't think. No, so we just need to know what to add and subtract. And the adjusted balance will be 279. We started with money in the bank, add 899, take away 600, gives us 578, which agrees to our adjusted cash book. Right, task 5 is about using the journal. So Mark runs a small ice cream sales business. He has produced accounts using a spreadsheet up until the 1st of January X0, now wishes to start using a cloud system. The following items need to be included as opening balances. Right, so this should be quite straightforward. So the capital there, 12126, we know that's a credit. We're just using dead click. Oh, I don't need the highlighter anymore, get rid of that. I've then got asset, a bit of a catch-all, but that must be the van. So 12,000. Bank overdraft, an overdraft is a liability. So that must be 94 on the credit side. And then inventory, 220 must be a debit because it's an asset. Oh, that's not typing in, just bear with me. Here we go. Right, Ranveer runs a small accounting practice. He has recorded the following year-end journal in his account system. The receivables ledger control has a closing balance before processing of 1367 debit. And we've got to credit that account with 320. So 1367 take away 320 gives us 1047. Right, then we have the payroll. So Arthur employs 8 people. He needs to prepare a journal to reflect the following. Right, so let me get it so I can just about see everything. Right, so gross wages is an expense. Employer national insurance, it literally says employer national insurance. That's a further expense to the business, so they are both debits. PAYE is another, stands for pay as you earn. So that's the income tax, and we owe that to HMRC. So it's a liability. We've taken it off of our worker and we owe it to HMRC as a liability. So it goes in there. National insurance we also owe to HMRC. So this will be both of the national insurance figures added together. So 625 and 192 gives us 817. And then the net wages we know is calculated as the gross pay, so 11,334, subtract the tax, 658, and then subtract the employee bit that's deducted from the gross pay of 625. All right, so that should give you a figure for net wages of 10051. So that is a credit because we owe that to our workers. And what you should do in this question is just add up your debits and make sure that they're equal to your credits, because any journal, of course, should have equal debits and credits, and that will work here. Task 6, journals to correct errors. So this is naming the errors, dragging and dropping. So Harry bought a new laptop for his business using his personal credit card rather than his business account. As it did not come through on the bank feed in his accounting system, he completely forgot to include it in his accounts. So it's just not there at all. So that would be an error of omission. It's missed out, and you've got the word miss within omission. Tarek quoted a customer £800. When producing the invoice, he recorded the sale and the receivable as 900. So in other words, it's the correct double entry, but it's the wrong amount. So that is an error of original entry. Any wrong number on both sides. Serena purchased some machinery for long-term use in her furniture repair business. She coded this to repairs, which is an expense, instead of to assets. So that will be an error of principle. It's in the wrong account and it's in the wrong category. Mamel, don't know how to pronounce that, I'm sorry, coded an invoice for his monthly warehouse rental, which is an expense, to electricity expense. So they are both expenses. That's an error of commission. A payment was received into the bank account of £303. So that would be debit the bank. This was from a credit customer who owed £330, but the bank transfer had been mistyped. As the system could not identify an invoice to allocate the receipt to, it allocated it to the suspense account. And this was the only entry in suspense. So what's happened is it's gone debit bank and then the system doesn't know where to put the credit. So it's dumped it in suspense. So that would be your answer. The following errors have been identified when reviewing the year-end accounts of Motortronics. A single payment to a supplier of £750 related to two separate invoices of £320 and £430. As the system is unable to match the payment, similar to the last question, it was included in the suspense account. Right, so let's do that one first. Show the journal entries to correct. Right, so we've made a payment to a supplier, so it'd be credit the bank, that would be okay. And then the system is going to have dumped it as a debit into the suspense. So now we know what it is. We want to remove it from suspense and make sure that it ends up in the PLCA where it rightfully belongs. You can sort of check that makes sense, because if we make a payment to a supplier, we know that the bank figure appears on the debit side of our PLCA, reducing the liability. Second bullet point, an electricity expense of £370 has been coded to wages and salaries. Right, so we've got something sitting as a debit in wages and salaries. Shouldn't be there, so it needs to come out of wages and salaries and into electricity expense. Sonia runs a very small business selling garden plants. As she only has a few transactions each month, she has chosen to operate a manual system. A customer paid her £12 directly into her bank account, and she has recorded it as debit bank credit. Oh, no. Debit bank debit receivables ledger control account. That should have been credit. But she has debited the individual account in the receivables ledger. So it should have been credited, of course. Right, the amount that will be included in the suspense account is... Right, so as a result of this, we've got too many debits. So that means, well, how much would we be out by? This should have been a credit of £12 and it's actually a debit of £12. So we know that when something's on the wrong side, we've got to double it. And we know that at the moment, we've got too many debits, and therefore we would have 24 credit sitting in the suspense account. And the other way to think about it is, if you imagine your receivables ledger control account that's sitting there, you could draw it with the £12. And you know that to fix it, you've got to go credit the RLCA and debit suspense twice. So in other words, you're going to end up debiting suspense with £24 to fix it. So therefore, you can conclude that there must have been an opening difference on the suspense account of £24 credit. Quite tricky, that one. Right, number 7, extracting a trial balance. So first bit of this should be quite straightforward or very straightforward. So you're just balancing it off. So in this one, just adding those two together. In this one, you've got just 2412. In this one, you've got 55 take away 17. And in the final one, we've got to, lots of calculator work. So we've got to add up the debit side and subtract all these figures on the credit side, which comes to £17851.70. Always worth double checking. Lots, big calculations like that. And then you have to complete the trial balance basically for those accounts up here. Now, I have had reports that in the real exam, it doesn't name the accounts. So we have to know that if we've got a balance carried down, then it becomes a brought down on the debit side. And it's that brought down figure that goes into the trial balance. Now, obviously, in this one, they've named the account, so you know that plant and equipment's an asset, so it must be a debit. But don't rely on that. It might be that the question is such that you have to just know that the balance carried down is the brought down on the opposite side, and that it's that figure that appears in the trial balance. So you can use both methods here, in fact. So you can do the brought down and then go, does that make sense? Yes, I'd expect sales returns to be on the debit side. Capital, if we went back up, was 38,000. It should be consistent as well. So you see how, I don't know if it will mark you down, but you see how they've put in things with pounds and pence. I would just err on the side of caution and be consistent rather than just putting in, oh, it's annoying. Yeah, there we go. Right, the RLCA was a debit brought down of £17851.70. And then when you add it all up, £93,860.57 on both sides. Right, so on to the final task, task 8. So we've got an initial list of balances. Some year-end errors have been identified. So once you know what you're doing, this question should be easy. All right, so you look and see what accounts are in play in the journal. So I've got irrecoverable debts where I have to debit 427. So irrecoverable debts I know is an expense. So I know I'm starting with a debit and I've got to debit it. So therefore I've got to add 1604.22 onto 427, which gives me my debit of 2031.22 for irrecoverable debts. The only other one is rent, which is being credited. So with rent, I know that I'm starting with a debit, 9488.32. I need to credit it, so that's subtract 1276.48. and that gives me a rent figure of 8211.84. And then the rest should be straightforward. So sales is a credit, so stick the number in there. Wages is a debit. Cash 3246.87. Obviously cash is an asset, which is why it's a debit. Drawings 19,000. And then in this one, add them up. I have had reports that the one in the exam, or at least one of the ones in the exam, is not a full trial balance, it's an extract. And the student fiddling about with it for hours thinking, oh no, it doesn't balance, and sort of putting things in wrong because trying to make it balance, but it was just an extract, so it was never going to balance. Right, so that is the end. So submit the assessment and hopefully you then get your answers. Don't forget, this is just telling you the pass mark percentage. To work out your score for this one, you will have to add together all the, oh, there's one wrong there. 11 out of 12, task 4, I better go back to that. I wonder what was wrong there. I wonder if I missed something. Well, I'm not going to go back to it on this video, so it's only 1 mark, so I'm not sure what's happened there, why that's not right. So yeah, because I can't get back, can I? Don't think. No, just keeps telling me the same. Right, so advice is always take photos as you go, because then you like what I didn't, because then I would know where to find that mistake. And then if you go back to where you launched the exam, go back 1, you will find the mark scheme, and then you can check your answers against the mark scheme. Okay, that's really important. There's no point just doing something not knowing whether you were right or wrong. Just going to have a quick look at the answers for, what was it, task 4? Is the bank rec? Why did I only get 11 out of 12? Guess I didn't enter in the last number or something, because I'm pretty confident it did match. Okay, leave it there. All right, I hope you found it useful. Thank you.